Do you think humanity is just a weak race, easily wiped out in the vastness of the universe? Did you know that the most powerful empire ever to exist had to surrender just because of a single victory by one ship? But the scariest part hasn't even been told yet. This story, are you brave enough to face the truth of what we really faced? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where we explore the most thrilling cosmic mysteries and unimaginable battles. Don't miss a single moment of this story, because you won't believe the outcome. If you want to know what really happened afterward, keep watching, and remember to hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. I remember the day the Dominion arrived like it was yesterday. It's burned into my mind, that moment when everything changed, when we, humans, became more than just another species in the vast, uncaring expanse of space. For 1,000 years, the Dominion had expanded across the galaxy, an unstoppable force. Their empire was vast, its reach stretched far beyond the outer limits of known space. They crushed civilizations beneath their boot, annihilating anyone who dared to resist. They had never faced an enemy that stood their ground, until us. When the Dominion's fleet arrived at the edge of our space, I was stationed at the outer defense station, just one of many, but still, I had a front row seat to history. We had no idea what was coming. They sent us a message, simple in its wording, but heavy with the weight of 1,000 ships, 1,000 dead worlds: surrender or face annihilation. To any other race, it would have been the end. But we weren't like the others. When their ultimatum reached us, our response was brief, just one word: acknowledged. That's all we said. No begging, no threats, no pleas for mercy. Just that one, cold transmission, acknowledging what they had sent. A single word, enough to send the Dominion into a frenzy of laughter. They underestimated us. It was almost comical to them. To their mind, we were just a primitive species with no understanding of our place in the galaxy. They didn't see us as a challenge, but as a target. And so, they came. 50,000 ships. But they didn't know what we had been preparing for all these years. The camera pans to the mighty fleet of the Dominion, stretching out across the dark fabric of space like a serpent coiling toward its prey. Massive dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small moon, gleamed in the cold light of distant stars. They were beyond anything we had, technologically speaking. But despite their overwhelming might, they couldn't have anticipated what was waiting for them in the colonies they came to conquer. At first, it was as they expected. They came down on our outlying colonies like a storm. There was little time to prepare. The first few colonies fell within hours. Our forces put up a fight, but it wasn't enough. Railguns screamed across the void, lashing out with fierce, defiant strikes. Nuclear warheads exploded in bright flashes, but they barely scratched the surfaces of their invulnerable ships. Each strike, futile. But we weren't done. The next few colonies? They lasted longer. Days instead of hours. Our people fought harder, with a tenacity they didn't expect. The Dominion began to notice something: our technology, while primitive in comparison, hit harder than it should. Our weapons shouldn't have been able to damage their ships, but they did. Each battle grew longer, and the Dominion grew more confused. By the time their fleet reached Earth, they thought we'd be nothing more than a shattered, broken species, our defenses crippled. But they were wrong. The scene shifts to Earth, where our planet's defenses are ready, standing firm like a sleeping beast awakening to defend its territory. The Dominion's fleet hovered above, ready to descend with the weight of their arrogance. The camera zooms in on the massive, intimidating ships hanging in the atmosphere, towering over our cities, casting their long, menacing shadows. And then, they saw it. One ship. Just one. A single human vessel emerged from Earth's orbit. To the Dominion, it seemed absurd. One ship? Against 50,000? The ship, though impressive in its own right, appeared small, almost insignificant compared to the vast fleet they had amassed. It barely registered on their sensors. Its power output was laughable by their standards, barely enough to show up against the Titanic warships in the distance. But the Dominion's arrogance quickly turned to curiosity. What did they think this one ship could do? Would it run, fight, or perhaps make some kind of desperate stand? They were about to find out. The human ship began moving. At first, it was slow, almost casual in its approach, but it didn't veer off course. It didn't make any attempt to engage with the enemy. No evasive maneuvers. No sudden bursts of speed. It just moved forward, straight toward the heart of the Dominion's fleet. The Dominion fleet laughed. They thought it was a mistake, a last, desperate attempt by a broken race to make some kind of final stand. A foolish attempt to ram the flagship. But that's not what happened. The ship kept moving, its path unwavering. And that's when the first crack appeared in their invincible facade. The Dominion's shields flickered. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable, a slight shift in energy. But then their entire system shut down. One by one, the massive warships lost power, their lights dimming as though something had turned off their very life force. Crew members scrambled, trying to restore control, but it was useless. And then the real horror began. It wasn't the ship firing weapons or launching missiles. No, the ship itself was the weapon. Something far beyond anything the Dominion had ever seen. The fleet's communications flooded with screams of terror, but it was already too late. Ships, powerful ships that had once instilled fear in every corner of the galaxy, began to disappear. Not explode. Not even burn. They simply ceased to exist. There was no wreckage. No escape pods. No debris. Nothing. The ships just vanished. And still, that one human ship kept moving forward, cutting through the fleet like a knife through flesh. The Dominion, once the unchallenged rulers of the stars, had never faced anything like this. In minutes, their fleet, 50,000 ships, was erased, leaving only the void of space behind. The final transmission from the human ship came just before it too vanished from their sensors. A single word, acknowledged. And with that, the war was over. The Dominion fleet had been completely destroyed, not in battle, but through some unknown force, something that bent the very laws of reality itself. And as the silence stretched across the cosmos, one question hung in the air: what had just happened? The Dominion didn't know. They were the conquerors, the rulers of the galaxy. Yet in the blink of an eye, they had become nothing more than prey, their arrogance shattered by the sheer, inexplicable force of that single human ship. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the universe, something older, something far more powerful than the Dominion, was watching. The scene shifts, and the camera zooms in on the massive, imposing flagship of the Dominion. It hangs in space, a floating fortress, dark and cold as the abyss around it. The ship is vast, its hull lined with jagged, crystalline structures that shimmer with an unnatural light, like the bones of a forgotten titan. At its core, an array of glowing engines hums with power, sending faint ripples through the fabric of spacetime itself. It is a symbol of the Dominion's might, a ship that has seen countless worlds fall before it. From the bridge, the Dominion War Council watches in anticipation, their eyes narrowed as they observe the lone human ship on the edge of their fleet. A tiny speck in the dark, barely visible against the vastness of space. The ship itself is deceptively small, by their standards, a silhouette defined by sharp angles and a sleek, metallic surface, as though it had been forged in the heat of a dying star. Its surface reflects no light, absorbing the darkness around it. From a distance, it almost appears to pulse, as if it has a heartbeat. The kind of ship that shouldn't be there, unfamiliar, unsettling. The Dominion commanders chuckle, dismissing it as nothing more than a desperate attempt by the humans to make a final stand. One ship? Against 50,000? They laugh at the absurdity of it. But that arrogance doesn't last long. The human ship begins its slow, methodical approach. There are no sudden movements, no frantic energy. Just a steady, unwavering course toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. The commanders on the flagship watch, perplexed. They are accustomed to threats that come in the form of weapons fire, missiles, or fleet maneuvers, tactics designed to intimidate, to disrupt. But this is different. The ship doesn't fire a single shot. No explosions, no warning. It simply moves. At first, they think it's a ramming attempt, a last-ditch effort to do something, anything. A single ship charging headfirst into a wall of steel and fire. But then, the impossible happens. The shields of the Dominion flagship flicker. It's subtle at first, barely perceptible, like a distant star dimming in the sky. The light across the ship's surface wavers, as if reality itself is being stretched and compressed. The commanding officers exchange confused glances. The ship's communication systems sputter, the screens displaying static as something deep within the ship seems to be malfunctioning. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, it stops. The ship's power surges back to full strength. But it's not over. There's another flicker, this time far more intense. The flagship's engines flare, sputtering as they try to compensate for an unknown anomaly. But it's no use. The Dominion fleet's communication systems go dark, one by one. The crew members on the flagship scramble, their faces pale with confusion and panic. The ship's lights flicker and pulse erratically, casting long, trembling shadows across the room. The very air seems to grow thick, as though the ship itself is struggling to breathe. And then it begins. Ships from the Dominion fleet start to vanish, one by one, without warning. They don't explode. They don't burn. There's no shockwave, no debris, no scattering of dust. It's as if they were never there at all. The first ship disappears in a silent flash, its sleek form flickering out of existence. There's no sound, no final transmission, no cry of distress. It's just gone. A shadow swallowed by the dark. The flagship trembles as another ship vanishes, then another. Soon, whole sections of the fleet are gone, reduced to nothing. The Dominion fleet, 50,000 ships strong, begins to dissolve into the nothingness of space. No remnants, no wreckage, just emptiness where there had once been a formidable war machine. The remaining ships panic. Crew members flood the communication decks, trying in vain to restore their systems, to reach out to their lost comrades. But there is nothing to reach. They are completely alone. The terror sets in, deep and cold. There is no escape. No safe harbor. The ship's captain, once a commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, stares in horror at the unfolding chaos. He shouts orders, desperate, but his voice cracks, a reflection of the dread that gnaws at the heart of every officer in the room. And then, it happens again. A massive cruiser, one of the Dominion's most feared vessels, simply ceases to exist. The ship's hull, which had once been a testament to their technological supremacy, flickers as if it were a mirage, and then it's gone. In its place, there's only the cold, black void. Not a single particle of debris remains. The rest of the fleet falls into complete disarray, their once pristine formations unraveling as they try to flee, to regroup, to escape whatever force is tearing them apart. But it's too late. One by one, the ships blink out of existence, until there is nothing left of the once mighty Dominion fleet. And then, silence. The narrator's voice cuts through the stillness, its tone low and grave. Ships, just gone. No debris, no escape pods, no distress signals. The fleet, 50,000 strong, was erased in minutes. The once impervious warships, the titans of the Dominion, reduced to nothing but memories and shadows in the depths of space. The human ship? It too vanished. No trace, no sign of it ever having existed at all. It was as though it had never been there, as though it had never crossed their path. The camera lingers on the emptiness, the vastness of space now eerily silent. Where once there had been a fleet of warships, there is only the cold, indifferent black of the cosmos. Not a single ship remains. And in that emptiness, the galaxy is left to wonder, what kind of weapon could destroy an empire with just one ship? What kind of force could bend the laws of nature itself and erase an entire fleet without a single shot fired? The Dominion may have been the conquerors of the galaxy, but in the end, they too were nothing more than prey. The silence lingers for a long moment. And then, the universe waits. The scene opens with the ominous, dimly lit war room of the Dominion High Command. The massive walls of the chamber are lined with dark, pulsating energy conduits, each one humming softly like a heart beating in the chest of a colossal beast. The command center itself is vast, stretching infinitely in all directions, as though it were an extension of the flagship itself, cold, metallic, and steeped in the remnants of countless conquered worlds. The air is thick with tension, suffocating even the bravest of minds. Emperor Voronchaw stands at the head of the council, his towering form draped in robes of deep crimson, the imperial insignia embossed with gold at his chest. His face, usually calm and calculated, now betrays the unmistakable marks of fear. His eyes dart nervously over the holoscreens, watching as data streams flash across the room in a chaotic blur. His fingers tremble slightly as they hover over the edge of the marble table, his knuckles white from the pressure. Surrounding him, his most trusted officers stand in rigid silence, their eyes wide with confusion and dread. The once imposing War Council, known for their icy resolve and relentless efficiency, now appear small, almost childlike in their helplessness. They murmur among themselves in hushed tones, unable to grasp the nature of the catastrophe that has befallen them. The air is thick with a sense of desperation, as though the very walls of the chamber are closing in. The Emperor speaks, his voice low but firm, cutting through the hushed murmurs. "We need to find them. Now. I want answers. What did we face?" His words echo, a demand to the void, a plea to the cosmos that has refused to provide any answers. For the first time in the history of the Dominion, fear hangs heavy in the air. The mighty Empire, once a force that could crush entire star systems beneath its boot, is paralyzed. The generals, once so proud of their supremacy, now fumble with data streams, trying to make sense of the impossible. They replay the footage over and over, but it only brings more questions and no answers. The images are the same every time, their fleet, 50,000 ships, all reduced to nothing. No debris, no wreckage, not even a trace of energy. Just blank, empty space where there had been fleets, where there had been power. They search for a pattern, a flaw, a clue in the data. But nothing matches their understanding of warfare, of physics, of the very laws of nature that govern the universe. The ships didn't explode, they didn't self-destruct, they didn't even burn out in a fiery storm of weapon fire. No. They were unmade. As if their existence had been erased from the fabric of reality itself. The panic begins to spread. A ripple runs through the officers as they look to each other, seeking an explanation, but finding none. Their minds reel, trying to fathom what they're facing. A weapon that does not destroy, but disintegrates. An enemy they cannot see, cannot touch, cannot even comprehend. "How could this happen?" one officer murmurs, his voice thin with disbelief. "What kind of weapon could do this?" The Emperor does not respond immediately. His gaze shifts to the large holoscreen in the center of the room, where the data streams continue to flicker, but even their once mighty systems are beginning to malfunction, glitching with strange distortions. He looks at the faces of his generals, his most trusted advisors. Their expressions are all the same: fear. Raw, primal fear. The kind of fear that no amount of military power can overcome. "Send out scouts. I want every corner of the galaxy searched," the Emperor orders, his voice shaking slightly. "We can't let this slip through our fingers. We need to know what happened to our fleet. We need to know what we faced." But even as he speaks, the words feel hollow. A futile command. No one can truly fathom the enormity of what has just occurred. Suddenly, the chamber's lights flicker. For a brief moment, the room is plunged into darkness. A low hum fills the air, rising to a deafening crescendo, as though the very structure of the building is alive and trembling under the weight of some unknown force. The Emperor's grip tightens on the table, his heart pounding in his chest. The room holds its breath. And then, as the lights return, a new transmission appears on the main holoscreen. The words, stark and cold, flash across the display. "Just one ship. Wait. Why did the humans only send one?" The message is simple, direct, but its impact is immense. It is not a plea for help, nor a request for mercy. It is a question, one that cuts deeper than any weapon, one that makes the Emperor's blood run cold. The realization dawned slowly, like a creeping shadow across the hearts of the War Council. What if this wasn't a weapon at all? The room falls into complete silence as the words linger in the air. The generals exchange glances, their faces pale, their eyes wide. They can no longer dismiss this as some simple trick, some temporary malfunction. This wasn't a battle lost in the traditional sense. This wasn't the enemy merely using force. No, this was something far more terrifying. The human ship, with its single, unwavering approach, had unmade them. It had torn through their fleet as though it were nothing more than a mirage, something unimportant, insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. It wasn't just an enemy they had to defeat. It was something far more insidious. Something they could not even begin to understand. The Emperor's voice cuts through the silence once again, shaking with the weight of the revelation. "Find them," he whispers, the command barely audible, but the fear in his voice palpable. "Find them, and destroy them, before they unmake us all." But even as he speaks, deep within his heart, the Emperor knows, this is not a battle they can win through force. This is something far beyond their comprehension. And as the Council scrambles to take action, the question still hangs in the air: who, or what, are the humans really? Admiral Kryn stood at the command center of his flagship, the Dominator, his sharp eyes scanning the endless expanse of space that stretched out before him. His fleet, 1,000 strong, had arrived at the designated coordinates with military precision. The battle-ready vessels, gleaming like polished blades, hovered in the void, silent, ominous, and prepared for any threat. The vastness of space around them was suffocating, an endless ocean of inky black that swallowed every trace of light. It felt wrong. The usual hum of the fleet's engines had settled into an eerie quiet, each ship suspended in the blackness like a lone, heavy stone floating in the void. Kryn had seen many things in his long career, but this was different. The coordinates had been confirmed, the target was clear. But now that they had arrived, there was nothing. No human ships, no signs of life, no anomalies on the radar. Just cold, indifferent emptiness. "Admiral, we've completed the initial scans," reported Lieutenant Tora, her voice steady but laced with concern as she checked the status console. "There's nothing here. No trace of their fleet." Kryn's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the cold metal railing of the command platform. His mind raced. They had expected a confrontation, anything, really, other than this empty nothingness. "Continue scanning," Kryn barked, his voice sharp. "I want every quadrant checked. They're here somewhere." The lieutenant nodded, her fingers flying across the control panel. But as the moments ticked by, a thick unease crept into the pit of Kryn's stomach. The sensation was subtle at first, a slight shift in the air, an almost imperceptible hum in the background that seemed to come from nowhere. Then, without warning, the ship's lighting flickered. "Minor power fluctuation," Tora muttered, more to herself than anyone else. But Kryn could feel it, the change. A subtle distortion in the fabric of space itself, like the air had become thicker, charged with something unseen. It felt as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Do another sweep," Kryn ordered, his voice now laced with tension. "Find something. Anything." The silence that followed was suffocating. For a long, agonizing minute, nothing moved. No ships, no signals, no disturbances. But then, the first one disappeared. It was the Sovereign, one of their most advanced warships, a symbol of the Dominion's might. Kryn watched in disbelief as the ship's position on the holographic map simply vanished. No explosion, no flash of light, no dying scream over the comms. Just gone. The screen blinked once and the ship was erased, as if it had never been there. "Report," Kryn snapped, leaning over the communications console. "Sir, we've lost all contact with Sovereign," the communications officer replied, his voice trembling. "No distress signal. No debris." "Impossible," Kryn muttered, his eyes narrowing. "That ship was equipped with multiple layers of shielding, and the entire fleet is in constant communication." A loss like that shouldn't be. Before he could finish, another report came in, this time from the Revenant, the flagship's escort vessel. It had disappeared, too, gone in the same way, with no warning, no clue. One ship after another blinked out of existence, as if they were never meant to be there at all. "Admiral, we need to get out of here," Tora exclaimed, her voice rising in panic as another ship, then another, was swallowed by the void. "We're losing them faster than we can react." But Kryn's eyes were fixed on the readings. His hands were still steady on the control panel, but his mind raced. What was happening? How were they disappearing? One ship, then 10, then 50. It didn't make sense. There was no debris. No evidence of an attack. No rips in space or visible anomalies. Just nothing. And then, the ripple appeared. It started as a small, undulating wave in the fabric of space itself, a distortion at the edge of the fleet's position. At first, it looked like a mere fluctuation, a trick of the light, perhaps, or a malfunction in the scanners. But the ripple grew, spreading across the void like an invisible tide, warping space with a subtle yet undeniable force. It was as though reality itself had begun to bend. Kryn's heart raced as he saw the distortion rippling outwards, swallowing entire sections of the fleet. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't even a ship. It was something far worse. Something ungraspable. The ripple passed through the fleet with terrifying speed, consuming ships in its wake. Then came the voices. At first, Kryn thought it was just interference, a glitch in the comm systems. But as the distortion grew stronger, the voices became clearer, and they were unmistakable. A whisper, so faint at first that he thought he might have imagined it, but then another. And another. "You were warned." The words echoed in Kryn's mind, filling the air around him. The voices were not coming from any ship, not from any known transmission. No. These voices, they seemed to come from everywhere, from the very fabric of space itself. They were not a call to arms, not a threat. Just a statement. And it was enough to send chills crawling up Kryn's spine. "Admiral, we're losing more ships," shouted Tora, panic now evident in her voice. Kryn's eyes widened as he saw the last of the fleet, every single ship, vanish in an instant. No explosion. No fire. No sound. Just nothing. As though they had never existed in the first place. The ripple passed through them, erasing them from reality as though they were dust scattered on the wind. The entire fleet was gone. The Admiral stood in stunned silence, his mind unable to process the magnitude of what had just transpired. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence in the command center was suffocating, heavy with the weight of the impossible. And then, in the vast, empty void where the fleet had once stood, there was only darkness. The kind of darkness that could never be filled. The Dominion had sent 1,000 ships. They had brought all their strength, their might, their technological prowess. But in the end, they had been nothing more than shadows, erased by something that defied all understanding. In the wake of the disaster, there were no bodies to mourn, no wreckage to salvage. Just a cold, empty space. The ripple in space stretched out, waiting. And the voices whispered once more, faint but unmistakable, "You were warned." The heart of the Dominion Empire lay in its capital, a sprawling metropolis that stretched across an entire planet, gleaming with the power of 1,000 civilizations. The palace stood like a jagged spire, its towers reaching up into the void as if daring the stars themselves to come closer. Inside, the Emperor's throne room was cold, an imposing chamber where the air itself seemed thick with the weight of countless decisions. Yet, today, it felt heavier than ever. Emperor Voronchow paced before his council, his once imposing figure now diminished, his face etched with deep lines of fear. The once unshakable confidence that had guided his reign was gone, replaced by a quiet desperation. His eyes darted from one advisor to another, searching for some kind of answer, some semblance of control. "The fleet is gone," one of the counselors said, her voice trembling. "We've analyzed every bit of data we have, and there's no explanation. It wasn't a battle, it wasn't anything we've ever encountered. They were erased. The Emperor's hands clenched into fists. The terror that had gripped the Dominion since the disappearance of their ships seemed to have taken root in him, spreading like a poison through his veins. "We sent thousands," another officer added, his voice strained. "How can we be defeated by one ship? One ship, no less? They didn't even fight back. They just disappeared us." For a moment, the room was silent. The galaxy's most fearsome empire had been brought to its knees, not by a superior weapon or a superior strategy, but by something so unfathomable, so mysterious, that even the greatest minds of the Dominion could not begin to understand it. "We need answers," Emperor Cha finally spoke, his voice low but edged with anger. "We need to find them. I want another message sent. To Earth." His command was met with a hushed hesitation. "Your Excellency, we've tried," an aide spoke softly, careful not to anger the Emperor further. "Every message we've sent, it's been ignored. No response. No engagement. No hint of any kind of negotiation. It's as if they have no interest in our surrender." Cha's eyes narrowed. "Send another," he ordered, his tone unyielding. "A final plea. A message of surrender. Maybe they'll see reason." The aide scrambled to follow the command, the room buzzing with the frantic activity of the palace's communications specialists. The message was dispatched, a desperate plea for answers, one last attempt to bridge the unbridgeable gap between the Dominion and the enigmatic force that had erased their greatest warships. Hours passed. The room grew tense as the communication screen flickered to life once again, the familiar cold hum of the system filling the space. The message they received was simple, almost haunting in its brevity. It appeared on the screen in plain text, its words hanging in the air like a shadow, refusing to be ignored. "One ship was enough. Do not make us send another." The message was cold, direct, its meaning impossible to misinterpret. The Emperor's face paled. He had expected an answer, perhaps an ultimatum, but not this final, cryptic warning. His mind raced as he tried to understand what had just happened. How had the humans managed to accomplish what entire fleets could not? How had they made it so simple? Another counselor, too afraid to speak out of turn, quietly suggested, "Perhaps we should prepare for negotiations. They may wish to discuss terms." The Emperor shot him a look of disdain. "No more terms. No more offers. We've sent them our best. We've begged for an explanation, and they've given us one. One ship. One ship was enough." The terror in his voice was palpable. The implications were terrifying, and worse still, it was becoming clear that this wasn't just about the humans. It was about something much greater, something beyond their understanding. A force that could act in the shadows, that could erase entire fleets with a single movement. What was it? Who controlled it? What would happen if they failed to heed the warning? The Emperor stood, a figure of silent frustration, looking out into the endless stars. In a galaxy where the Dominion had once been invincible, where their will had shaped the very fabric of civilization, they were now reduced to a cowering shadow of their former glory. He knew it. His council knew it. Every officer in the room felt the gravity of it, that sinking knowledge that their empire, the empire that had once crushed worlds, was no longer a predator. They had become the prey. The transmission ended, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. "What do we do now?" asked a voice from the back of the room. Cha turned slowly, the weight of his decision hanging in the air. His empire had once been an unstoppable force, but now, that power had turned inward, consumed by fear. The Dominion had no choice but to shrink back, hiding behind its borders, afraid to take a step beyond them. "We do nothing," the Emperor said quietly, the terror clear in his voice. "We wait. We wait." And so, the once mighty Dominion Empire, feared across the stars, found itself paralyzed. Their greatest weapon was not their ships, not their soldiers, not even their technology, it was fear. The fear of an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat. And in the end, that fear reshaped their entire civilization. They never sent another fleet beyond their borders. They never dared to challenge the unknown. The Dominion, as it once was, ceased to exist. It became a shell, a reminder of the fate that awaited any who dared to overstep their bounds. The truth remained hidden. The humans never revealed it. They never told the Dominion what had truly happened. They didn't defeat them. They didn't even fight them. There was something else watching. Something older. Something far more powerful. And the Dominion had learned, too late, that when you cross certain lines in the galaxy, there will be no mercy. The final transmission echoed in the empty space, acknowledged. The screen faded to black, and with it, the last remnant of the Dominion's arrogance. And so, after everything, the mighty Dominion Empire, the most powerful in the universe, bowed its head to humanity. But the truth remains. We didn't defeat them. We didn't even fight them. Something, or someone, intervened, controlling it all. And if they dare to cross that line again, next time, there will be no mercy. Everything will be erased, as if it never existed. What do you think about this confrontation? Do you believe we are just pawns in a much larger game? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story to continue following these thrilling stories. See you in the next video.